In the last video, you learned how to display both string and visual component data in a data group container using the default item renderers. While these classes are very useful for simple displays, they do not allow you the full range of expressiveness that you might want to employ for your application. In this video, you will learn the basic building blocks for creating your own custom item renderers. You will first build an item renderer inline and then as a separate class file. When you create a custom item renderer, you have full control over the display of the data. You can use any component and containers you need to in order to manipulate the visual display. You can create the custom item renderer in two ways. This first code sample shows the item render property nested within the data group container. The second code example shows the item render property referencing an external class file. In this video, you will learn how to implement a custom item renderer in both ways. This is the data for my display. In the last video, I used string and image tags for the data. In this video, I have consolidated the data into generic object instances with name-value pairs. You will often see this done to ensure that related data is handled as a unit. Below the layout property in the data group container, I am adding an item renderer tag set. Within this code, I'm creating an instance of a component using the component class. This instance cannot be empty and is defining a new scope for the content it contains. Lastly, I will create an actual item renderer instance using the item renderer class. Take care to note that the outer item renderer block is named with a lowercase I, which denotes that it is a property of the data group container. The inner item renderer block is an instance of the item renderer class, which is why it begins with an initial uppercase I. The item renderer instance can contain many tags, including these listed here. You will learn about states in a later video of this day. For now, just know that states define different visual aspects of your renderer. For instance, in a data group container item, you might have a normal state that users see by default, and then a hovered state that users see when they mouse over the item. To create states, simply create a states property block in your item renderer tag block and create one state instance for each state. You must always define at least the normal state. Back in Flash Builder, I'm creating a states property inside of the item renderer instance. I'm creating one state named normal. This code shows a button instance inside of the item renderer instance. You could implement single components like this. If you want to use multiple components in your renderer, you must place them inside of a container. Remember that the component tag block represents a new scope. That means everything inside of it is blind to the content outside of it. To access the data within the item renderer, you must do so through a property named data. In this code, you can see that a label control inside of the item renderer would reference the last name and first name values from the data provider object by first referencing the data object. I want to display the employee's image below his or her name, so I'm adding a vgroup container below the states block to lay out this display. I'm creating a label control that binds the text property to the data.firstName value and a literal space, and then the data.lastName value. The image control's source property will bind to the data object's image file value, which references the images in the images directory of this project. When I save the file and run the application, you can see that each employee is displayed, below their name. Notice the default hovered state. Remember that each employee's display represents one rendered iteration over the items in the data provider dataset. I want to create a visual distinction between each item by applying a gray background and border. So I'm changing the vGroup container into a border container instance. I still want the content to be laid out vertically, so I'm adding a layout property with a vertical layout instance. I'm also going to horizontally align the content to the center and vertically align it to the middle. To add the border around each item, I'm adding a border weight property set to a value of 2 pixels and a background color set to a value of CCCCCC, which is gray. When I save the file and run the application, you can see that each item in the data group container is rendered visually distinct from the others. You can imagine that writing complex item render displays inline to the data group container may get unwieldy. Therefore, you can also create the item render display in a separate class file and then simply reference it from the item renderer property. The class file will extend the item renderer class, and all the other rules you just learned about creating item renderers do apply. By convention for this training series, I am storing my component files in a components directory. I am right-clicking on the source folder for this project and selecting New Folder. I am naming the folder Components and then clicking Finish. Next, I need to create the new component class file by right-clicking on the Components folder and selecting New MXML component. The name of the renderer class is Employee Item Renderer. I am clicking on the Browse button to the right of the Based On field and typing Item Renderer to select the Spark class to extend. I am also deleting the width and height properties and then clicking Finish. In the new Employee Item Renderer MXML file that opened in the editor view, I'm adding some white space for the code I'm about to add. Within the data group container instance, remember that the components tag block creates a new component scope and is essentially like creating a new component class file. The item renderer tag block is the actual instance of the renderer and is represented by the fact that we are extending this class in the new class file. I'm cutting all of the code inside of the item renderer block and then returning to the new class file and pasting it. I'm saving the file to maintain my changes and then returning to the main application file. I'm deleting the nested item renderer property from the data group container and replacing it with an inline item renderer property. For the value, I am pointing to the employee item components dot employee item renderer class file. Remember that the class file is in the components directory. When I save the file and run the application, you can see that the display is exactly the same. The only difference is structural. I have separated the item renderer code from the main application code for easier maintainability. For your next step, work through the exercise titled Displaying Dynamic Data in a Custom Item Renderer.